everyone. Hi everyone. Let me give you guys a minute as you come into the room. For those who are watching me on replay, thanks for joining. I will give you a quick intro to who I am. My name is Desiree. I blog over at SLPTalk with Desiree. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some pieces of advice from myself, and then for other, hi Suzanne, for other, from some other bloggers too, on some advice for if you are starting your school placement as an SLP graduate clinician, or if you are a supervisor and so you have a graduate student coming to have their field placement with you. So I have a grad student starting this week, so it was pretty pertinent for me. So I thought that I would share some of those tips and tricks with you that I've learned along the way as a supervisor, and then so what some of my friends have said as well. So we'll do a top 5 tips and tricks kind of thing. They really honestly aren't in any particular order, so they're all equally as important, but there are top 5. So the first one I have for you is that your first one is to bring your A game. This goes for it goes for the graduate clinician. Bring your A game in that, yes, you are probably in your home stretch. You are so ready. You can like taste your diploma. It's so close to you. You just want to reach out and grab it. You may be applying for jobs. You may get a job while you're doing your in your school placement or your spring placement, field placement. However, do not lose sight of the fact that this is the jumping point of your career. This is where you're going to kind of show, and you're going to really go on, show that work ethic that you have. Take it seriously as if this is your job, because it is right now. This is what everything has kind of been leading up to for you, is to really be able to practice and do this. So take it seriously. And because that supervisor you have is going to be a reference for you someday. Even if you think you have a school placement and you think, I'm not going to work in the schools, or halfway through you get a job with adults, you never know. You really never know where you may land. So make sure that you are giving it 110% and really giving it at your all, because it's not just for you, and it's not just for your supervisor, but it's for those kids that are there too. On the flip side, if you are the supervisor, same thing, bring your A game. You need to model the work ethic that you want your graduate student to emulate. So make sure that you aren't, take a graduate student to teach them to help grow our profession. And it's not an opportunity to then kind of just sit back and let them do your job, because they're there to learn from you. You're there to try to help guide them. So yes, you do need to put ownership and put the responsibility on their plate somewhat as well. But you are there ultimately, this is your caseload. This is what you do. So take that job seriously, because really, if you think about it, what a great opportunity to have to be able to kind of model and shape where our profession is going with, even through one graduate student. You're that one graduate student who knows how many lives they'll touch with how many kids they see throughout their career. So it's a pretty awesome responsibility when you think about it. Okay, so that's tip 1. Let's bring your A game with work ethic. Tip 2 is to invest in your students. From the graduate clinician standpoint, invest in those kids that you're seeing in the school. Get to know them. Yes, you will probably get copies of their goals and their IEPs, what they're working on. You'll look through their evaluations. Yes, that is obviously incredibly important. However, don't neglect the student behind that data. Everything that's led you up to this point has been really driven on that evidence-based practice, everything you've learned in theory. Now is your time to put it into practice, but make it relevant and really get to know those kids as people, because that is somebody's son, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's brother, somebody's sister. It could be your colleague someday. Who knows what you may inspire in that child. So make sure you see that child as a person too, not just a case study in a sense. And then on the flip side, for if you are the supervisor, make sure that you're investing in your graduate clinician. Find out what they like. Find out how they can kind of use that to help drive their therapy, how they can use that to help with that rapport with their students. Find out how many hours they need in evaluation, in specifically to articulation, to language. Figure out all that stuff that you need in the beginning, because it's much easier to kind of set up for, okay, let's see what different things we can do, ways we can make this work. Then at the end of the placement, you're thinking, oh, you need all these hours that didn't happen. So make sure that you're open with each other as to what their expectations are of you and what yours are of them. Okay. So number 1 was work ethic, right? Was bring your A game. Number 2 was invest in your students. So number 3 is to tackle the paperwork. So this one, Kayla, from SLPTalk had sent in this tip too, with making sure that you give your graduate clinician the opportunity to really dive into the paperwork. And I will be the first to admit, I have been guilty of this as a supervisor, in trying to, with the best intentions of trying to say, okay, gosh, I know this is a lot. Our jobs are a lot, and especially in the schools, we are very overworked quite often, you know? And so it's hard, and you think, gosh, that's a lot to put on you. But make sure you're putting on that paperwork on them too, because they do need that opportunity to be able to practice that, and to be able to practice that when you can have feedback and you're going back to someone who's right there, can say, I don't know how I wrote this, or you have someone that's going to give you that feedback right there. Because when you're a CFY and you have that supervision, obviously I've supervised CFYs as well, but it's not quite as direct, the supervision. So it's not, you don't have somebody in that same room as you, or right there at your disposal. So make sure you take full advantage of teaching them the paperwork, the ins and the outs, and help their confidence for when they have a job someday where they're gonna feel like, okay, at least I know the process, I know what I'm doing. Okay. So that's tip number 3 is paperwork. So for those of you joining you, recap, tip number 1 was work ethic and to bring your A game. And you can go ahead and hit the replay and kind of hit my tips on there. And I'll also put a link to the blog post on it too in the comments here too, so you can always reference that too. Tip number 2 was to invest in your students. Tip number 3 is inspired by Kayla, and it was to make sure that you are, doing the paperwork, tackle that paperwork. So tip number 4, this tip was, and this will hopefully help you if you're a graduate clinician to feel confident in that, yeah, I do need to do this, is to ask questions. Because this, when I put out a feelers as to what tips different people have, and different SLP blogger friends of mine, to see what they would like. And overwhelmingly, people constantly said, ask questions. They said they wish they had asked more questions when they were a student, or they felt that they learned most from asking questions. Kristen from Talking with Twang says that you will have questions. You need to make sure you ask them. You have the opportunity to learn, you have the opportunity to get the answers to those questions. So make sure you take that opportunity. Hallie of Speech Time Fun said she needed to learn that it was okay to ask a question. So make sure that you do. It's all right. You aren't expected to know it all. And yeah, in the blog post, newsflash, 16 years in and I still don't know it all, which is fantastic, because if I think I know it all, then I really shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Because that's one of the glories of our job, is that it is a field where we are constantly learning. We're constantly reinventing our own practice and what is really what's best, because we're looking at what's the current evidence, what's the current research on this. So, and our world is evolving. 16 years ago, the technology in our world was much different than it is today. So the communication, because of that technology, is much different. So it's constantly evolving, and it's going to continue to evolve. So you will always be learning. So learn to ask questions, because you know that you need, that is a skill that you need to have in order to self-reflect and really figure that out in order to be the best clinician that you can be, just in our profession, not even just as a graduate student. So ask questions. Take chances. Tip number 5. So Felice from the Dabbling Speechy, this was one of her tips too. She said she wishes that when she was in graduate school, she would have taken a few more chances, that she wouldn't have she didn't say play it safe, so I don't want to use her words, but she said that to be okay with messing up, because she's learning, and I agree, I feel the same way, that sometimes the best therapy and the best things you learn are from the mistakes that you make. No, and for you and for your students too. And it's important for your students to learn too that it's okay to make mistakes. So take those risks, take those chances. have the evidence and the practice behind it, but take those risks. Don't stay stagnant. As a supervisor, Felice felt like she has a student that's starting with her as well. What a lucky student to have that placement, huh? So she's hoping to help understand their needs and see what they want to get too, and have that open line of communication with them too. So it sounds like the setting for a great student placement. Susan from Kids Learn Language. I didn't want to mess that up. Sorry. She said when she had her supervisor, her supervisor came from a very rigid program, and she was given a very specific script on how she needed to do things, and kind of wasn't able to play with it at all. So she tries to, she's learned from that experience, and so with her graduate students that she has now, she has them ask questions. If she gives them feedback, she gives them a rationale as to why. This is why, I'm not just telling you to do this. Here's my thinking behind it. Here's the why as to what I'm suggesting. So that is her tip. So let me know in the comments too, with you guys too, if you have any tips too that you can think of, anything you've learned along the way as either a student, as a supervisor, if you are a graduate clinician, something that you would like to learn along the way. As those come up, I'll kind of give you a little more of a little tip as to what I'm doing to kind of prep for my graduate clinician. So those of you who know me know I love these happy planners. So I, over the winter break, picked up a happy planner, and I saw it, and I saw the quote. I'm a big quote person, so I saw the quote, and it said, so it kind of thought, oh, this is perfect for that. It says, today is the perfect day to start living your dreams. So I thought, oh my gosh, how perfect. So I'm going to help set her up with a planner. Hi, Kathy. With a planner I'm going to put in there too the calendar for our school, or for our district calendar, so she'll have that. I have also printed out our IEP program, allows us to print up an IEP at a glance so that she can get an idea of what the kids' goals are. Obviously, she's going to read through the IEPs and things like that, and in their entirety, but I want her to be able to have access to the kind of the nitty-gritty of the IEP and what the students' goals are and things like that. So when she's at school, she can kind of see that. And then also I'm going to provide her too with some input, an input sheet. I want to know about her. I want to know what she wants to know, what she wants to get out of this placement. So kind of get some of that feedback from her. I am actually sharing her with another SLP in the district, which is a great opportunity, I think, for the student clinician, because they're very different settings. I work in K through 6, and the others, SLP that she's with she's phenomenal, but she works with a lot of like the MD kind of placement, so she's going to be doing a lot of working with those students as well as some preschool. So she's really getting a nice real overview of a lot of different populations, which is a fantastic opportunity for her. So that way the other SLP and I will both know what different things she's looking for from her placements. And then I will also, have some expectations so she knows like what I'm looking for, what are my expectations of this placement too. I find it's easier to kind of lay that out in the beginning and set that out than kind of have to backtrack and maybe in later on down the road. So set us up for success. So to recap really quick, super quick recap as we to finish it up for those of you who joined in a little bit late. Number one was Number one was to bring your A game with your work ethic. Bring your A game. Number 2 was to invest in your students. Number 3 was to tackle the paperwork. Dive in there head first. We do a lot of it in our jobs. You might as well get used to it now. Tip number 4 was to ask questions. Ask. Do it. And then number 5, I don't know why I'm holding up my thumb. Number 5 was to take chances, take those risks, and push your limits. So thank you. If you have any questions at all, pop them in the comments. And I thank you so much for joining and spending your Sunday evening with me. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.